Good evening. A very warm welcome to you all. I think I've started this twice, so all the panelists will have heard me say this already. But we are a year into lockdown, but we still have technical issues, so we're very sorry for the late start. But we are truly delighted to be with all of you today for this event. I'm Georgina Wright, and I'm the head of the Europe programme at the Institut Montaigne. This will be the fourth and our final event in a series of talks that the Institut Montaigne has organised together with the Polish Institute of International Affairs and the Austro-French Centre for Rapprochement in Europe. I will present our panel very shortly, but before I do, I will give the floor to Hans-Dietmar Visegrad, Secretary General of the Austrian-French Centre for Rapprochement in Europe, and then Łukasz Jurczyn, Director of the Brussels office of the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Hans-Dietmar.
Well, thank you very much, Georgina, and let me join you in welcoming the audience to this, as you said, last event in a series of events we did jointly with you, the Institut Montaigne, on the outlook and the perspectives of the Visegrad countries on issues related to the future of Europe. And we felt that this was important since the role of the Visegrad 4 is not always as well understood as it might be necessary. We had events before that on Slovakia, on the Czech Republic, and the last one was a dialogue, Austro-French dialogue, I should say, with Hungary. This time on where we bring in Poland, and I'm very grateful that the Polish Institute for International Affairs is hosting this. Thank you very much, Łukasz. I think we take a slightly different turn rather than focusing and discussing broad issues like the Future on Europe conference and expectations on what it might produce. We decided that we would focus on what is probably the key issue for the future of Europe, and which is, of course, climate change and the contribution of the energy transition to this climate change. And I think bringing in the three countries with very different perspectives will certainly produce a very interesting discussion. I leave it at that. Thank you very much, Łukasz, again for co-hosting this with us and the Institut Montaigne.
Good evening. Very shortly, because we are quite late. Sorry for that. Also, many thanks, Hans-Dietmar, for your kind words, for your introductory remarks. I must say that it's a really great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Polish Institute of International Affairs Brussels office. We are really delighted that we could gather such distinguished panelists. So thank you one more time for accepting our invitation. So we had more than around 60 registered participants. So there's a huge interest in this discussion. We are very glad that we could join this Austro-French dialogue on the Central European region on that perspective, namely on V4. And I think that Poland is very well placed to take an active role in this dialogue, as it has its presidency in the V4 format, and especially on that so crucial, important subject about energy transition, about energy sovereignty. I think it's the most important issue for the EU integration as a whole in the coming years. And I just would like to underline that it's not only about the energy sources, but it's also the question of security choices for Europe. And of course, I'm thinking here about the Nord Stream 2 project, and while Russia has been concentrating now its forces across the Ukrainian border, this project became more and more unacceptable. So I'm very glad that we'll touch the several levels of the European sovereignty term: European, national, and regional. And I'm giving the floor to Georgina to present our panelists. So the floor is yours, Georgina.
Thank you very much. So you've all heard a little bit about the series that we've been running and what we're hoping to cover in this session. So let me quickly introduce our panel before we begin. So first we have Minister Kurtyka, who is the Poland's Minister for the Environment. We have Minister Giwisler, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that properly, who's the Austrian Federal Minister for Climate, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology, which is quite the dossier. And we have Mr. Lévy, who is the CEO of EDF International, but also chairman of the Fondation Innovation pour les Apprentissages, chairman and CEO of Électricité de France. So thank you all very, very much for being here. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone that this event is being held on the record. If you'd like to submit a question, please do, and I will make sure I ask our panelists. And yes, we have around 40 minutes because I know our speakers do have to leave very promptly. So let's get the discussion underway and do keep your questions coming in. So Minister Kurtyka, maybe I can start with you. Poland has traditionally, I think it's fair to say, been reluctant to agree to ambitious binding climate change targets, mainly due to its large coal sector. But things do appear to be shifting. What is, in your view, Poland's new role in driving the EU's green agenda forward?
Georgina, thank you very much. Minister, President, great to see all of you and very happy to join this Central European but Western European debate as well, as we are having colleagues from France, Jean-Bernard Lévy, and of course from our region, as we are together with Minister from Austria. I think that the role of Poland is indeed very interesting in the way we can formulate at the EU level our principles of this transition. And what we bring, you mentioned the word traditionally. Well, it depends how long the tradition is. If we take the tradition to be 30 years, then yes, indeed, we bring something traditional in this way, because Poland started its transition to democracy, to the market economy in 1989 in an extremely particular situation from the point of view of the energy sector. Over-reliance on one single fuel, which is coal, no possibility to be able to provide alternative sources from other directions, only one single link gas supply from Russia, and an extremely brutal economic transition in the beginning. And so this somehow shaped Polish energy policy, Polish sensitivity. And I think it is shifting right now, as you, Georgina, rightly said, and it's shifting extremely quickly, but it's also bringing very interesting questions to the European debate. So I think that the first question that we are bringing to this discussion is how not to replicate this brutal transition from the beginning of 90s that we experienced in terms of economic transition, unplanned, unmanaged, brutal, from day one to day two, 25% of industrial output falling down, unemployment rising like hell. Do we want this experience to be copied in the energy field in the 20s of the 21st century? I think no. So what we are bringing is this idea of just transition and necessity to make the change gradual, to make it planned, and to make sure that we are able to build alternative sources of jobs, taking into account that traditional ones will vanish. The second idea I think that we are bringing is our enthusiasm to technological innovation. And this enthusiasm somehow has been very much masked by this extremely monoculture reality of our energy sector since the beginning of 90s. Poland started with 97% production of electricity from coal in 1989. That's a very particular situation for quite a large country of 40 million people. That's a situation which is unheard of. And moreover, all these capacities were quite new in the system. They dated from 70s, from 80s. So we started with overcapacity in terms of coal production, and all these capacities had to be absorbed by economic growth. By the way, uninterrupted economic growth for 27 years, during which Polish GDP rose 7-fold times. So we could have absorbed it. And right now in 2020, 2021, we face a situation where we need to change the system. And it opens a perspective for technological innovation, which is filled with our new plan, energy policy till 2040, which bets on offshore wind, on nuclear, and on democratization of bottom-up energy security and energy which is provided from our citizens. And last but not least, I think we also bring a lot of sensitivity regarding energy security. As I said, we started our transition with no alternative, as at that time it was only possible to migrate from coal to gas. And we depended 100% on a single supplier. And our history, also the history of the region, showed that when you are not properly diversified, when you do not have alternatives, then this market monopoly will be exerted. So this is why we also bring to the European Union this message of not increasing the dependence on unreliable partners when it comes to exerting political pressure on our countries. But right now we did a lot in terms of our homework as well. We have the biggest gateway for gas supply in the region, which is Świnoujście LNG terminal. We are building Baltic pipe, so we'll be soon able to consume gas only from outside, not eastern directions, but from other directions, which will open, of course, a completely new era in terms of energy security. So I stop on that, but I think that we are really at a very interesting point, and Polish history, recent history, provides extremely interesting questions, not only for Poland in terms of energy transition, but also for the whole European Union.
Thank you so much, Minister. That was incredibly comprehensive and a great way to start this debate. Minister Kivis, maybe I can turn to you next and sort of perhaps ask you slightly your reflections on what's just been said. You know, is the Polish example indicative of a renewed debate on energy and power in Europe, especially given some of the things that the Minister was just saying now about, you know, it being an opportunity for jobs creation, how can we avoid a brutal transition, and actually the fact that you can't think about member states on their own, but there's very much a regional and European approach to this. So perhaps I can ask you to kind of comment on that.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation to this debate. I think it's highly relevant, very timely, and an extremely interesting mix of perspectives here. I think what we've seen during the last 2 years is a global shift, an accelerated global shift, which puts climate action, which puts the energy transition really in the center of policymaking. And the European Union, ever since our 2020 strategy, has been one of the drivers in this also global development for years. But now, and I can fully agree to what Michael Kurtyka has just said, we are at the crossroads. We are at the historical, probably truly historical moment in time. We are now at the point in time where we need our whole power system, our whole energy system needs really fundamental decisions, as we cannot simply go on longer by ramping up renewables without phasing out fossil fuels, without phasing out nuclear, and without addressing questions such as baseload power itself. So not only for climate, for technical reasons, that's one aspect of the debate. But if I say we need fundamental decisions, then I really want to express my sincere appreciation for the Polish efforts in the last years, because the phase-out plan for coal in Poland is such a decisive move for the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, and is really an important contribution to the fight against the climate crisis. Just let me add 2 more points. The one point is that, of course, if we say that every country works, plans, strategizes, makes decisions on varying preconditions, a different historical path, a different current constellation, every country has to do its homework. So does Austria. So that's why we are working on our 100% renewable electricity goal for 2030 with a legal basis now in the negotiation in Parliament. Climate neutrality until 2040, and many other projects that we are working on. And I think the second question that we need to address, and where also Michael Kotika has made a point in that in his intervention, that we need to work on our goals of decarbonization, climate neutrality, and a just transition together. So. And this fundamental change and these fundamental changes that we have do not come without political steering, and they do not come without big changes. So the transition we have in front of us will really change fundamentally pretty much every aspect of our lives. So leaving no one behind needs to be not just a headline, we need to fulfill this promise. But we also need to be very clear. We cannot turn this argument around and make it an argument against the needed change. But we need to take the political responsibility and the political guidance and steering in the transition that we need. And there, I think the transition towards a green, meaning renewable and energy efficient system, is really where also the perspective for many of the regions in Europe lies, with green and sustainable jobs, with economic power from within the region. So I think this is really the triple benefit that climate action can bring in jobs, in economic prosperity, in a climate and future-proof energy system. And of course, this needs European cooperation. I think we'll come to that in the ensuing debate. Using our strength outweigh our individual weaknesses through cooperation. So we really need to also do this together, but really look at a very holistic revamping of our structures in the energy sector. And this is the task ahead. This is the task of the generations of politicians who now need to debate this, go into the dialogue. It's not easy questions, but we've proven with the new 2030 climate targets that we can come to solutions, that we can sit together, talk it out, and come to a conclusion. And we now need to make this proof in every single of the political initiatives, in every single of the energy policy questions that we have at our decision at the European level. But I think that's our task, that's our responsibility, that's the historic moment in time.
Thank you very much for that. Equally, very kind of thought-provoking, and I'm hoping we can come back, as you both ministers have talked about homework. Maybe we can look at some of the tasks that will be set more specifically. And you talked about dialogue as well. Well, one of those important dialogues is obviously going to be with business. So, Mr. Levy, you've been sort of listening to all of this. You know, politics are important, but these decisions are going to have huge consequences, but also opportunities for businesses like yours. How, in your view, do energy companies, what must they do to support Poland's energy transition?
Thank you, Georgiana, and good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, ministers, if I may say. Maybe before I answer your question, I first like to say that obviously for business, and especially for large companies, multinational companies like EDF, business is important, as you said, but policymakers are more important. And it is up to the policymakers in each government in the European Union to decide of its energy mix, to decide of its electricity mix. And it is our duty and our pride that in each and every country where we operate, we will of course abide by the decisions made in the governments and in the parliaments of those countries regarding the energy mix. Needless to say that we have a huge respect for what Poland has decided, considering what Minister Kurtyka said with much better words than I could do, what Poland has decided, which is to join, of course, the New Deal in Europe regarding climate change as a major priority for all European nations, all European countries. And needless to say that we would like to be a reliable partner for this transition, which would take 20 years or more to be implemented, because as we all know, Poland is proud and happy that it has for several decades built its prosperity on its coal resources. Fine. And now coal is a problem, and now this issue must be resolved, and we hope we can help in that respect. So we are happy that we will look forward to have a permanent dialogue, and we have already met several times with Minister Kurtyka, and also met with other decision makers in Poland, in order that with our assets we can bring all we can as a reliable and long-term partner to Poland, because this is a very long-term challenge, which we're happy that we will be part of. Maybe a few more significant and technical points. First, we are very happy with our ability to control, to have good understanding of all key technologies in the world of energy. We used to be very present in the world of fossils. We almost have none. By the way, yesterday we announced that we are selling our last gas station in the United Kingdom. And wasn't the United Kingdom a country that built its own prosperity on its local resources, which were coal for a century and a half, and gas more recently, and now we see the magnitude of the energy transition that has happened in the United Kingdom, and we are proud that we are part of it as the largest generator of electricity in the United Kingdom. So what has been done in the United Kingdom, I'm sure will be able to be also replicated, everything being equal, of course, being replicated somehow in Poland. So this needs, of course, to understand what are the technologies that are needed, what is the innovation that's needed. And with our R&D, we are happy. With our also operating experience, we are happy that we have a good mastering of all these technologies. The second thing I'd like to talk about is our ability to understand sovereign issues. And I started by that because I think in the world of energy, there is no way that we will be successful if we do not reckon the primary goal of sovereignty on each and every country, and the fact that as a business partner, we will respect all sovereignty aspects, and we will have the ability to transfer a lot of know-how, competence, and technologies to those countries who are demanding that, who are requesting that. And this leads me to a third aspect, which is jobs. Of course, a lot of countries, maybe more and more outside Europe and less in Europe, will rely on imports, on import of maybe gas as an energy, which is in a transitory mode, because we know that with a lot of gas, we will never meet our climate objectives for the planet. And we cannot rely on gas in the long run for anything significant, unless some technologies which today are emerging will finally make it. And it is not something that we will play with, gambling on emerging technologies to become mainstream solutions, because it may work, but if it doesn't work, where do we get the power from? So we will also imply in our approach to Poland that we will discuss how we can enhance the skills of the Polish workers and what solutions we will prepare will be based on jobs. And my last point is that we are the largest generator of low carbon electricity in Europe. We account for 25% of low carbon electricity in Europe today. And we'll be happy with that experience of low carbon technologies, low carbon electricity, but also a very reliable electric system that we believe we can really support the 2040 plan for Poland, which Mr. Kurtyka and the Polish government have designed. And we are very happy that the first discussions that we've had on this can be promoted, prolongated, and will, I hope, end with a very long-term accord between France and Poland, which have been partners for centuries. Am I right? Centuries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and a nice optimistic note to end on, and a reminder of sort of the longer history around some of these decisions. Just a reminder to our viewers and listeners that you can submit your questions. I have lots of questions I'd like to ask, but if you have any, I will make sure I ask them. I think Mr. Lévy, was right when he said, every member state is responsible for their own energy mix. And we could spend, I think, hours talking about different types of energy, whether it's hydropower, nuclear energy, but also the future of gas, notably in the Nord Stream 2 context, with Łukasz mentioning it earlier. But I'd like to turn to carbon first, given it's one of the hot potatoes now discussed in the EU. Maybe Minister Kurtyka, I can turn to you first. Do you think the EU should introduce a common carbon tax or a common carbon price at the European level?
Thank you very much. I think we have to take into account still a very different economic environment in the European Union. If we introduced one single carbon tax, then it would apply in the same amount between Lisbon and Helsinki, between Amsterdam and Sofia, between Kraków and Hamburg. And we do not share the same revenue per capita. And also Poland, for example, is growing rapidly. Still, it is at the level of 70% of European average in terms of purchasing power parity. So introducing one single carbon tax would unavoidably punish the most fragile part of our population within European Union. So we rather must think of solutions which drive the industry and which make that the industry is bringing to the market better solutions. And when this industry is grown, is mature, it's taking up. For example, here in Poland, we experience a real boom in terms of photovoltaics. Poland had in December 2015 only 4,000 prosumers, so families which equipped their rooftop with a photovoltaic panel. But 5 years later, in December 2020, so only a couple of months ago, we had 450,000 households, PV, and families equipping their houses. And this is mainly due to 2020 boom. 250,000 families equipped their roof with a PV panel despite the COVID. What is the reason behind? Well, we have introduced a support scheme, yes, because we can afford to it, but technology is 10 times cheaper than it was when Energiewende was invented in 2010. and when rooftop PVs costed 10 times more than they are costing now. So we must make sure that when we think of any uniform solution within European Union, we take into account various possibility, economic possibility of the population. And again, we are going very much to capital-intensive technologies, which appear to be very climate-friendly. When you speak of a photovoltaic panel, of a windmill, of a nuclear power plant, of an electric vehicle, then they appear to be extremely costly when you buy them and extremely cheap when you operate them. So when you consider in Poland buying an electric vehicle in Zgorzelec, which is a city on the Oder river, on the other side of Oder you have Görlitz, a German city. In one city, you have 3,000 euro salary, and in Poland you have 1,100. Or a Volkswagen ID3 or a Renault Zoe costs the same, 30,000 euro on both sides of Oder, because we share a single market. So in this capital-intensive revolution, we must take into account very different possibilities of the population and not increase fragility in this regard.
Great, thank you very much. Talking about sort of some strategic investment there, and it's something we might come back to if we have time as well. Minister Givisler, would you agree with that assessment? I mean, you talked about sort of climate and energy and this being a historical moment, and we know that, you know, the UK and Italy are sort of co-hosting the COP26 this year. So what do you think the EU should be doing to kind of achieve its climate and energy priorities?
Lots of questions in one. Let me focus on 3 points. You're commenting on the question of carbon pricing and the future of carbon pricing. I think if we go the pathway and that there's no alternative to the pathway to net zero emissions, then we require a wise combination of policies and measures, including fostering truly innovative technologies, emission standards, as well as carbon pricing mechanism. But I share some of the skepticism. I'm not yet fully convinced whether an expansion of the ETS or similar ideas to other sectors, especially road transport or buildings, is really the best solution forward. We are working on a national carbon pricing mechanism currently, as well as many other countries are doing, but we are looking forward to the proposal that the European Commission is going to make in the Fit for 55 package on the way forward there, and we'll be happy to discuss that, of course. In terms of what Europe needs to show also towards the COP26, I think if we want to stay true to our ambition and to our mission to lead the way also globally, to be an example globally, then I think we need to be clear in terms of what this future is. And I think it's quite clear that the Green Deal, in terms of are we true to its implementation, requires a combination of energy efficiency and renewable sources of energy. And I also want to stress from the beginning that while we fully respect the right of each and every member state to choose their own energy mix, let me just make 3 quick points why I think renewables and efficiency is the only winning strategy in this. I think we all agree on this panel, coal has no future. We have a challenge with gas that not only in terms of leading it to a lock-in, it leads also to a lock-in in a triumvirate of high cost, climate incompatibility, and political vulnerability. There is niche for gas. We need to look very consistently on how we switch to renewable gases. Maybe we have time for that also in the discussion. But we should not start now by building the next problem. So the next coal, if you want me to be polemic in this. And the third, because we've discussed a lot about capital intensity of this transition, it's quite clear that this transition needs massive investment. So we need to make sure this investment goes in the good direction, in the most efficient, in the most affordable, in the most successful technologies. And we need to make up our minds about this now, because we cannot spend the money twice. And this is for me one of the most striking argument against, from a national perspective, you know our stance on nuclear, but from an economic perspective, the most striking argument against nuclear. So while it struggles in some countries with social acceptance, I think what's quite clear is that all the newly built projects from Flamanville in France to Mochovce in Slovakia face cost explosion and excessive time delay. And if we agree that we need to act now to counteract the climate crisis now, then I think it's simply too slow and too expensive for that. So why I agree with Mr. Kurtika on many aspects, where I don't agree is to mention PV and nuclear in one line in terms of capital intensity, because the developments on the prices have gone quite the opposite direction of these two technologies. One last sentence on COP26, and they're also looking back at COP24. I think what Poland started in terms of work in Katowice, I think we now need to conclude and bring up the next level in the COP26. I think it's important that Europe comes with a renewed ambition to this COP26. I think we see a lot of international momentum, but it's quite clear that we need to deliver in Glasgow. We need to deliver on the promise of Paris, and that goes both in terms of enhanced NDCs, in terms of enhanced long-term strategies, in terms of climate finance, in terms of also finalizing the open ends that we still have from previous discussions.
Thank you very much, Minister. And also COP26 will be an opportunity to see how Europe works with other countries as well. We know that Monsieur Lévy talked about the UK and the UK's ambitions for net zero, legislating in law for this, but also obviously other allies and partners. Mr. Lévy, I'm going to turn to you, and I'm going to ask you one question that I have, and then a question from the audience. One is, how do you think, we've talked a lot about sort of, energy mix and what businesses can do, but what do you think the EU can do to assist companies like yours in, meeting their green sort of transformation? And the second question we have from the audience is, what in your view is the role of nuclear energy in the coming decades in Europe? Thank you.
Thank you. First, what we expect from the EU, a stability in regulation, visibility in carbon pricing. We have seen carbon prices in euros per ton of carbon dioxide emitted is roughly today around 43, something like this. 3 years ago it was 5, from 5 to 43. How can you plan in a business like ours, where it takes years to develop and to build a project? And by the way, it takes also years to develop wind farms. I'm happy to say to our friend, the Minister of Austria, it takes years to develop a project, but do you build it based on the price of 3 years ago, which was 5, or the price of today, which is 43? And obviously, we are asking for visibility on carbon pricing. So while we are very eager that we continue as we are today with a carbon price mechanism based on market, we believe there should be something like a floor, so that at least there is an investment signal for all this money which is available. The second thing we would like, above the stability of the regulation and the stability of the carbon pricing, is that we have a good financing proposition from the EU, and obviously the current taxonomy ignores some of the key low carbon technologies which are needed, such as hydraulic and nuclear. And having hydraulic, which I believe is quite essential to Austria and to many other countries in the Scandinavian area, and which is important in countries like France and also in Italy, and of course in Switzerland, although Switzerland is not a proper state in the EU. Having hydro be being resisted by in the EU is quite amazing. So we would expect that the taxonomy in the EU is in line with what is expected in our modern times, which means that the taxonomy just reflects the low carbon objective that we all have. How can we? How could we have one day the taxonomy in Europe be organized in such a way that the only nuclear reactors, only hydraulic dams that could be built in Europe could be financed with non-European financing sources, non-European money? So I think right now there is a gross misunderstanding which is being made regarding the project of a taxonomy in Brussels by the Commission. And by the way, I'm happy to say that several countries, including Poland and France, have written to the EU regarding this matter. And the third aspect I would like to talk about is nuclear in Europe. It is very striking to me that when we talk about anticyclonic conditions, say in the wintertime when there is not a lot of sun, and as we have seen in several periods in the recent years, including in January this year, and including in February this year, and maybe also right now in March this year, it is very striking to me that under these quite common meteorological conditions in Europe, all the countries which are asked about how do you do without a low carbon baseload solution say we import. So strikingly, everybody imports. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Precise but comprehensive as well. We are running out of time, and so I'm going to ask a question, but I will ask each of our speakers to not hesitate to kind of add anything else that they'd like to do. I've had so many other questions, but we did get one question about sort of the future of gas. So maybe Minister Kurtyka, if I could turn to you. You know, as an immediate neighbour, obviously Poland has long advocated to reduce energy dependence on Russia. And the question, I guess, is, you know, how do you see the future of gas in this context of sort of Nord Stream 2?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think two are not dependent one on the other. First, we will need gas in European Union, and because there is no alternative in some countries in terms of stabilizing the production of renewable intermittent sources other than gas. And here I'm very thankful to Leonore, to Minister Gewessler for excellent introduction to Austrian ambitious energy policy. Congratulations. And as was said, it builds very much on the strengths of Austria, a large hydro potential, which we can envy Austria to be able to stabilize renewables. We are not in such a blessed situation. Poland is rather a flat country. And here we have to turn to an alternative in terms of providing baseload electricity. And the only alternative in terms of providing zero emission, stable 355 electricity is nuclear. And I think that nuclear will be a source of very interesting industrial partnerships, of innovation in the future years, very much in line with IPCC panel, which foresees that in order for the world to reach climate neutrality by mid of the century, not only nuclear has to be preserved, but it has to be very much developed. And when I think of projects which has been announced in France of building 6 EPR2 reactors in the next 15 years, and when I think of plans in Poland of building 6 reactors as well by 2040, I can see that there is a lot of industrial opportunities within European Union. for safe production of electricity out of nuclear. And in this regard, we need to make sure that taxonomy is fitted with the reality and not with aspirations. Reality is that gas will be a transitory fuel. There is no other possibility in many of our countries to heat our houses other than by using gas. So taxonomy needs to take into account gas, needs to take into account also nuclear. Jokingly speaking, we shouldn't come back to the question which was asked to Henry Ford when he was asked about a potential customer, well, what kind of color can I choose for your car? And he answered, any, provided that it's black. So if we design taxonomy in such a way, then I think we will really lose a lot of opportunities in terms of sectoral coupling, in terms of technological development, in terms of jobs, and ultimately in terms of quicker path to reducing emissions than otherwise. So we need to remain focused. We need to approach COP26 in a spirit of ambition, but also of pragmatism in terms of what kind of technologies can bring us closer to the target. And I look very much forward to COP26 as well in terms of finalizing Katowice rulebook, Article 6 especially, which will open worldwide possibilities for the industry to bring more visibility. Jean-Bernard Lévy spoke about this visibility and opportunities around the world to optimize investments and to bring technologies where they are the most efficient in the world and in terms of emissions reduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I hope you can't hear the band that has just started to play near my neighbours. But very much thank you for that very comprehensive answer as well. Very conscious of time now. Minister Gisli, maybe I can turn to you. You know, we've talked about nuclear energy and obviously Austria has a position on that. You know, what do you think the future nuclear energy should be in Europe, and sort of any final words in maybe a minute and a half if you can?
Okay, I think the lesson we draw from this debate is we need more time on this debate, and happy to continue it in another situation. I think when we build our energy future in Europe, I think we need to also emancipate ourselves a bit from the arguments of the past. And I think this is as a general approach, I think this would help the debate move forward. I think in terms of the landmark, and I would really call it landmark regulation of the taxonomy that's now at our hands, I think this is one of the questions where we can really prove that we will walk the talk, that we give long-term, a predictive long-term outlook on what we in Europe consider a sustainable investment. It's not a ban on investment, and given the investment structure that nuclear has now in Europe, which is largely non-European, I think it's not a question of financing. It's a question of what do we consider sustainable financing, and there we need to be true. This is really about guiding investments in a future perspective, in giving consumers reliable, trustworthy information on what's a green investment, a renewable and an energy efficient investment. And I think whatever we do there, we also have to be clear that do no significant harm in all the technologies is what is a guiding principle that underlies this whole debate. If you allow me 30 more minutes, seconds, not minutes, obviously, no worries. Austria has a history in hydropower, and that's, of course, one of the strengths that we can also contribute in terms of European contribution. But it doesn't mean that Austria doesn't have big tasks at hand in our own energy system. 100% renewable electricity by 2030, big task. Decarbonizing the gas sector, avoiding the traps that we face now, that we really need to avoid stranded assets, sunken financial assets in gas infrastructure is key at this moment. So we need to make sure that in the transition, we don't have a series of backdoors that simply perpetuate a fossil world, and that we really look at it in a differentiated and very concise manner, also in terms of also the specific circumstances, because whatever is presented as a silver bullet solution also in history has rarely proven to be the silver bullet. So I think the future lies in a combination of renewables, efficiency, flexibility, democratization, as Michael Kotika has mentioned, because this is what will deliver on the promise of local value added, local green jobs, and a climate and future-proof development of our continent that we are here to shape now. Thanks.
Thank you for wrapping that up in 30 seconds and not 30 minutes. Now, I know we're now on time, so I'm going to give the last word to Mr. Lévy, reflecting on sort of what the ministers have said, and if there's anything else you want to, parting thoughts.
I think it's very interesting, and thank you for organizing this, that we see the convergence and the divergence between various European countries, and Europe has been built on its ability to meet all expectations. I understand that today all European countries share the same goal, but they do not, due to history, but also to local resources, as was very rightly said, they do not share the way that these goals will be met. I think it will be probably a huge challenge for European countries to be able to overcome these heritage that comes from local resources and from some of the decisions that have been made over time. Obviously, we had today very senior ministers from two countries which have made very different decisions over time, but which also have so different local resources that one can understand how difficult it will be to meet this challenge. Obviously, just as a business partner to many countries in Europe, we are happy that with our technology, with our ability to bring the right financing, with our ability to help all countries achieve the right level of skills and of sovereignty, we are happy that we maybe will be at some point in time a bit of the middleman. Business can be a bit of the middleman in order to help Europe achieve its targets and remain a united front against those countries who do not really believe in climate change targets.
Great, thank you very much. That's all we have time for, I'm afraid. I would agree with Minister's view that we clearly need more time. I think we've set up, the homework. We've got some of those tasks set on paper, but obviously, as Mr. Lévy was saying, it's about policies and tools, visibility and transparency. Thank you very much to all of you for listening. There will be a recording available, and thank you to PISM for the organisation. But finally, my thanks to our brilliant panel for this discussion, and I look forward to many more conversations. Thank you.